Second part of our town hall. Please join us in welcoming former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to the stage.
I think my friend, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, is here somewhere. And there she is. Thank you. I just saw another one of my friends, Congresswoman Titus. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you, Secretary.
It's great to see you, too.
Thanks. Welcome. So,
thank you.
As you know, President Obama now says he regrets voting to filibuster Justice Alito's nomination. Do you wish that you, like now I think President Obama feels as if, boy, wish I didn't have that vote. Wish I hadn't participated in something like that.
Well, the way I look at it is this. We had a process. You know, the nomination was made, and we went through the process. And Harry Reid's sitting here. He's an expert on the rules, a master on the rules. You get to use the rules. That happens a lot. And then you use the procedures that are available. And eventually, as you know, Justice Alito was confirmed.
Right. All right, let me move to another question. Many Democratic voters obviously didn't believe your criticism 8 years ago was fair.
I wish that we could elect a Democratic president who could wave a magic wand and say, we shall do this and we shall do that. That ain't the real world we're living in.
Why should they believe that the criticism you're making of Senator Sanders isn't just as unfair as they thought it was 8 years ago?
You know, I think that it's important for Democratic voters to evaluate who's got the best plans, who's got the most experience. I've actually been in elective office shorter period than Senator Sanders, who's been in the Congress 25 years. And I think it's fair for voters to also have the kind of progress that I'm advocating.
All right,
Secretary Clinton, a federal judge this week ordered Apple to disable the privacy feature in the iPhone. Apple CEO Tim Cook is pledging to fight it, calling it a dangerous precedent and saying the government is asking Apple to hack our own users. What do you think is right here?
Look, I think, Jose, this is one of the most difficult dilemmas that we're faced with. Of course, law enforcement, and what I keep calling for is to try to get the government and our great tech companies to figure out what is the path forward, because we don't want privacy and encryption, and we want to catch and make sure there's nobody else out there whose information is on that cell phone of the killer. And I'm well aware that the government has its needs. Obviously, Apple and the other tech companies are concerned about this. But as smart as we are, there's got to be some way we could try to help get information.
The problem is that if you open up that back door that doesn't exist right now, as you said, the United States is looking for information from a cell phone that was used by a terrorist. But does China have the same intentions?
Well,
and does Russia? And does Cuba? And does North Korea?
Well, Jose, that's why I said it's a dilemma.
Right, so
it's a legitimate dilemma. I am not a tech expert. Well, it's true. It's true. You know it's true. I mean, it happens to be true.
And by the way, you both have been booed at some time, so we actually have we can tell this is a competitive race at this point. All right, we're going to open the questions.
We like a good
back
contest.
Up to the audience.
We also like the facts. The facts are our friends, so let's talk about them.
Fair enough. Well, Madam Secretary, we're going to go and start with the issue of immigration. As you know, Nevada is almost 28% Hispanic.
Hi, Mrs. Clinton. In 2007, you opposed giving driver's license to undocumented people. Why?
Well, back then, it was a state-by-state determination. And I understand that somebody asked Senator Sanders a question because her husband was in Mexico. I don't know who asked that question. And I want to tell you, I will end the 3- and 10-year bar provision so that you do not have to face that ever again.
Madam Secretary, let me follow up on something. I've asked you a few times about the prioritization of immigration reform.
Right.
And you haven't put immigration reform first. If you don't put it first, that the same thing that happened in 07, the same thing in 10, how do you prevent that if you don't make it first? As you know, these legislative lifts are hard. And the concern is if it's not first, it may not happen.
Well, when we both had a chance to vote on comprehensive immigration reform in 2007, I voted for it. Senator Sanders voted against it.
Included in that legislation was a guest worker provision, which organizations saw is almost akin to slavery. And that was the major reason that I voted against that. I don't want to see workers in this country exploited.
If I'm fortunate enough to get the Democratic nomination, I will immediately begin working on the priority legislation that I want the Congress to deal with right away.
We shall do this and we shall do that.
Because I want to get the judges I want to appoint, I want to get the other important officials appointed. So I'm not going to waste a minute. That's why I want to get this nomination as quickly as possible so I can get to work on being their president. You know,
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Jose.
Secretary Clinton, just very quickly, usted se compromete, do you promise to deal with immigration reform within the first 100 days?
Absolutely. And we're going to introduce legislation, Jose. We are absolutely going to introduce legislation. It does have to be done legislatively.
Within 100 days?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce my priority legislation, and this is at the top of that list.
Mrs. Clinton, what would you do to make possible that the DACA students become permanent residents? You know, they live with a lot of fear because they have to renew their permits every 2 years, and that is a terrifying prospect for them.
Right. I don't know what's going to happen now because of the Supreme Court situation. I will go further if it's at all legally possible. The Republicans are going to see the error of their ways and quit using immigrants to divide our country and quit taking the kind of mean-spirited actions that they do.
Secretary, if I could, in the summer of 2014, you said undocumented children from Central America should be sent back, a position you've been defended by saying we had to send a message to families and communities in Central America not to send their children here. As far from the message Pope Francis had yesterday, he criticized leaders on both sides of the border, calling migrants cannon fodder and their treatment a human tragedy. Do you still believe that you held that position, and is that a right position?
Well, first, let me really express my deep appreciation to Pope Francis. So here's what I believe. Number one, so there is a process. We have to follow the process. We need to make sure that every child has due process and is guaranteed counsel. Again, I thank Senator Reid, but we need to do more to process families back in Central America so that they don't live in fear.
But should those children be a message?
We're doing a better job of that than we were.
Chuck?
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Joe Sacco. He's a realtor here.
As the Democratic presidential candidate who has delivered speeches to the largest U.S. financial institution in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees, why are you hesitant to release transcripts or audio-video recordings of those meetings in order to be transparent with the American people regarding the promises and assurances that you have made to the big banks?
Well, let me say this. I am happy to release anything I have when everybody else does the same, because every other candidate in this race has given speeches to private groups, including Senator Sanders. I take a backseat to nobody in being very clear, and that you can count on.
Secretary Clinton, I do respect you very much. In fact, only a decade ago, I was a very, very big supporter of yourself and your husband. It actually broke my heart when you said marriage was between a man and a woman. How can we trust that this isn't just more political rhetoric? Please just release those transcripts so that we know exactly where you stand.
Well, you know where I stand because I've been in public standing there the whole time. But let me say something about this. You know, I am a 100% supporter. I am absolutely adamant about protecting marriage equality.
Thank you. Francisco Morales here has a question for you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for your lifelong commitment to the Democratic Party and comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you.
But what would a Clinton administration do to ease the fears of home ownership among our community?
I want us to move in any way we can to the federal government. Secondly, we want to provide more credit so that more homeowners, Hispanic homeowners, African American homeowners, those who want to be, have access to better credit and better support. You know, credit has tightened up in ways that are just not fair. I'm running to knock down all the barriers that stand in the way of people getting credit, so we're going to make that possible.
My question has to do with Social Security. hardworking people pay into Social Security, that in the future they will receive the benefit of their labor and monetary investment. What is your specific plan to address this issue?
So important. The first thing we have to do is to give the Social Security Trust Fund to Wall Street. If you thought we had scandals and collapse before, think of that. And I'll have to talk with the Congress to try to figure out what's the best way forward.
Chuck. All right. Our next question. Secretary Clinton, it's been no secret that many Democratic voters are worried about some questions of trust. Our next question has to do with that, and it comes from Tiana Winters, who, by the way, supports you. Go ahead.
Good evening. My question to you is, because my generation is a little wary of placing another politician in the White House,
Right.
We need a rebel. How are you going to deserve our vote?
I believe with all my heart that I'm the president, and I know what has to be done, and I will do it. But I want to make some good things happen. I want to get back to the kind of racism, sexism, homophobia, all the other kinds of prejudice and bias that is out there. When my husband was president, and then we got to figure out, okay, how are we going to get it done?
Right.
How are we going to make it happen? I am absolutely confident I can do that. That's why I'm asking for your vote and your support.
Thank you.
This issue, to be a successful president, you're going to have to erase this trust deficit that you're dealing with right now. You saw it out of New Hampshire. How do you deal with it?
Well, look, you know, I've won one, he's won one, we've got 48 to go. And that's why we're here in Nevada, working as hard as we can. It is obviously troubling that people have questions about me, which I will do my best to answer. You know, when I ran for the Senate in New York, people said the same thing. You know, we can't trust her, we don't know her. So people are really asking, is she in it for herself or is she in it for me?
And so our next question comes from Adriana Guizar Vasquez. Adriana.
Hi, good evening. My question is exactly on your debt-free college proposal. Will your debt-free college proposal give the same opportunities to Latinos and DACA students as Senator Sanders' tuition-free proposal?
I might not be able to, and he may not be able to. Yeah, and you know, I think both Senator Sanders and I are seeking the same goal.
Good evening, Secretary Clinton. Your ties to corporate America have been at the center of this campaign. As President of the United States and former board member of the Board of Directors of Walmart, will you be silent on Walmart's anti-union campaign?
Well, can I tell you, the answer to that is yes.
But more importantly, will you propose legislation that protects the right of workers to organize in their workplace?
I know that there's a lot of stuff that is said and thrown around. Look at the facts. All the unions have endorsed me, and I want to tell you, including the commercial workers union.
One more question. Will you support a living wage of $15 an hour?
Absolutely. But I'm standing with a minimum wage increase to $12. And it would help so many women because the majority of minimum wage workers are women. So I'm absolutely in favor of it.
The caucus cough. We know that well.
Yeah.
What? Oh, yes, the cough. Secretary, a quick follow-up on that, and I know it's a state's issue, but driver's license for the undocumented. Do you foresee a time when the federal government would be able to include the undocumented in federal grants for education, for example? Because if the state doesn't do it, it doesn't mean that they don't have those dreams and aspirations that they can't reach because in Washington they decide that they're not equal.
Absolutely true, Jose. Dictators and authoritarians and chauvinists and sexists and misogynists has to be at the center of who we are as a nation and what I will do as president. You can count on it.
Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Oh my gosh, it's over?
It's already over. Done with this time. Thank you for your time, Chuck.
Thank you.
See you on the side.
We would try to go a third hour.
See you on the side.